Paganism is old. It's older than the name for it because nobody called themselves a pagan until a bunch of Christians decided to call them that. A lot of our modern paganry, though, is very new. And that's created kind of a crisis of conscience about how we are supposed to live this life. How much do we connect to the old ways? How much do we practice the new ways? And every faith is currently going through this right now. I see this really profoundly in a lot of the conversations around paganism online. So I thought today we would tackle two questions I see bantied about together. How do we live life as a modern pagan? And was magic real in the ancient world? I think you know the answer to both of those, at least for how I'm going to answer. So let's talk about it as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-pagan druid and priest of Brigid.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Pagan druid and sous chef to the Dogdo.
Today, we're going to be tackling two questions that I think dance around each other because if you are practicing any of the modern pagan revivals, there's always this question of how the ancients did it. Was it different back then? And for some people, there's this question of did the magic really work like that? And I see this in all kinds of circles because I see Christians having a lot of conversations about why don't we have people like Moses throwing rods on the ground and turning them into snakes anymore. So I think a lot of us are looking at the old stories and kind of having a moment of, was it ever really like that? How do we get back to that? And not really thinking about how we're living now or how we're living going forward. And I think there's a lot to this for us to unpack. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do original Christo Pagan and Druid episodes 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss anything right now, especially because we're going through our Druidcraft 101 series. All right, let's just get into it, shall we?
Is this going to be a smart aleck and say, hey, regarding the question of was magic real in the ancient world? Well, of course not. We know it was all a deep AI fake.
Right?
Yeah.
Was magic real in the ancient world? Yes. Is magic real now? Yes. Is it the same kind of magic that we practice today as they did back then? Yes.
Yeah. Why aren't people throwing sticks down and turning them into snakes like Moses? I love that question a lot because that one right there shows like if they would have read just a little closer in those passages, they would have realized, first of all, Pharaoh had his own set of magicians that were going toe to toe with Moses doing magical feats.
Yeah, the
So,
actual shocking part of the story, it was when Moses' serpent ate the other two.
Yeah, because they threw sticks down and turned into serpents too. So why isn't it happening today? Because, well, I guess the various churches and governments aren't parading their magicians out.
No,
in
the real
country.
answer is magic duels like this are still going on. They're just not as spectacular. And for those who are uninitiated or really silly looking, extra history not that long ago did an episode, and I still can't believe that this happened, on the magical battle of Britain where Aleister Crowley and Yeats had their duel at the gates to the Golden Dawn Temple. And yeah, the whole thing is like laid out in there. And we could have talks about whether these were two silly people making hand gestures at each other on a stairwell, or if Crowley didn't actually win because the Golden Dawn fell apart fairly quickly right after that.
Yeah.
So we can have some weird, like esoteric conversations on whether or not magic actually occurred there. But
that's why I was doing very tongue in cheek, because even during World War II, there were some magical societies in Britain doing some rituals and stuff that, when looking through the long lens of history, you sit back and go, yeah, they won. It was a magical duel. Some of Britain's wizards and some of Germany's wizards were dueling, and the British wizards won. Congratulations.
Yeah. Fortune was part of a coven that was doing all kinds of workings to try to curse the Germans and the German pilots. And yeah, it was a thing. No, I think the problem that we get is in these stories, like with all stories, they're embellished. All stories are grander than the events that originally preceded them, especially generations and generations later. And I don't even want to get into was there a historical Moses or any of that stuff, because I don't think that really matters or not. These stories are there for a different purpose. None of these ancient stories were there to teach us history. You have to understand our idea of history is tainted because what we call history now was invented in the 1700s as a way of creating propaganda to support the rise of the new nation states. And so we think of history in a very different light as trying to chronicle important events that happened. And even when you go back to the medieval chronicles and stuff, they were kind of trying to talk about events that they believed happened, but they really were a lot about how to understand these other countries or times or peoples or places than they were about the facts. These were stories. They were stories for the sake of understanding a thing, and that thing wasn't always the factual events that happened in real space time. And we've kind of lost that today because since the Enlightenment, we have gotten it's all about the facts, which has made history very boring, to be honest, because it's turned into just remembering a bunch of dates and all kinds of things that don't help you understand the actual events that were going on. You're not digging deep into the stories of the people and the places and the times. And so people are very separated from history. But what was the magic in ancient times real? Yes. Is it the same magic we practice today? Yes. Does that mean that they were literally spitting fireballs out of their mouth? Probably not. And I say probably not because I've been to some where people were breathing fire. Granted, they were also putting grain alcohol in their mouth first and holding up a torch, but there were fire breathers at some of those rituals. So these could be elaborations, exaggerations. I couldn't tell you if the druids were actually breathing fire in that way, or if this is just talking about the power of the words that he was speaking. And I don't
Also,
think it matters which it was.
yeah. Yeah, and also that question is an opportunity to reflect upon your own mental constructs, because we forget that science, what's considered modern day science, was born from the occult, was born
Yeah.
from magic practitioners.
It
It was all magic before. And what they're doing in science nowadays is magical. It really is truly magical to be able to sit back and hold a bit of plastic and metal in my hand and to fire a lightning bolt at another person that's going to stun them and make them fall to the ground. That's magical. That's a rod of lightning right
that
there.
is a red
Boom.
lightning.
We call it a taser. It's the same darn thing. It's a magical rod of lightning. This is the subtle manipulation of energies. This would have been magic.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
This world that we live in has become so disenchanted that we're not able to just accept the stories for what they were and to actually dig into what they were trying to tell us. What is the actual legend here? Right? Did Finn McCool really eat the salmon of wisdom? Was there really a Finn McCool? It doesn't matter. Probably didn't transform into all the animals, but I can show you a ritual where you can transform into all of the animals. But you know what? Not in the process of lycanthropy, actually be therianthropy, but you're not actually going to physically change, but you will have the experiences and everything. So there's a lot of practices in this that when we talk about shapeshifting and what shapeshifting is, that yes, we can still experience that today, but not in the made for TV movie way that I think a lot of people think that it was experienced in the past. I think that's the difference is that we're not looking at these stories for what they were. We're looking at them through this kind of power fantasy wish fulfillment lens that makes them something other than what they are. And as far as what that means for us today in our daily lives, I think it means that we need to be careful. I think we need to always be vigilant and mindful of how we're treating the deep lore and wisdom that we receive from our ancestors, because it's very important for us to remember that our ancestors weren't idiots. They were smart. They were humans. They were trying to understand the universe and their place in it, much in the same way that we are. Now, they may have been ignorant about certain things. They didn't know what germs were. They didn't know what DNA was. They didn't know about bacteria and viruses and all of that. And so we have to be very careful when we're taking any of their ancient wisdom, right? But that doesn't mean that we throw everything out. And it doesn't mean that we accept everything either, because I see this so much in various versions of Christianity that believes that it's doing this. And I see this in some pagan groups that are trying to convince themselves that they're doing this. Spirituality, religion, mysticism, whatever you want to call this, is not and should not be a museum. I am not here simply to recite the old stories. I think it's important that we know the old stories. I think it's important that we study the old stories and learn the wisdom from the old stories. But as somebody who is a practicing bard, I'm here to tell new stories and to tell continuations of stories and to tell those stories today. Because, yes, I love the story of Bridget with the cows and Brigid with the well of beer and Brigid turning all of the water into milk so that they can make cheese, right? I love all of these stories and they're wonderful stories. But when I think about what Brigid would be doing today, right? What is the forge that Brigid would be working on today? Is it still in the blacksmith shop? Maybe, maybe that's a distinct possibility. We still have blacksmiths, but I think the forge that Brigid would be working on today, when I think about Brigid's forge, I'm thinking about the computer because that's where a lot of poets are doing their work. It's the cell phone. That's the forge that Brigid is working at today because that's where we're experiencing our inspirations. That's where we're cataloging our inspirations. That's where we're forging these weapons we're taking into battle with us of our poetry and our songs and our music. That's where we're doing that today. And so if you can't imagine Bridget at the computer, I think that there's a gap in your practice of paganism. I don't mean to say that to be insulting or anything like that. It's just this fossilization that happens, this museumification of faith, right? When I watch the movie Chef, that movie is to me almost exactly a story of the Dagda. That's the story of the Dagda and his best friend trying to take probably Oma, maybe Angus. Because wait a minute, do he have a daughter or a son in that movie? Is one of his kids, maybe Brigid, one of his kids, down to New Orleans to experience a good beignet. It had all the elements of that kind of an adventure. We have that kind of reality in our chef character. This van that's operating as the cauldron. Because wouldn't the Dogda's cauldron nowadays be a food truck? Isn't that kind of the modern cauldron that people gather around to get their food, right? That's an analogy that works for me because I get the romanticism. I really do. I love this idea of this yearning for the simple life. And maybe I don't have as much as others because, as I like to jokingly say, I was raised in the 1850s. I remember living in homes that were powered by wood stoves, that if we wanted to eat, we had to put logs on the fire to heat the stove up. If we wanted the house to be warm in the winter, we had to put logs in the fire to keep it going. I remember having to go out and chop wood. I remember learning how to chop wood. I remember stacking wood. Oh, I remember stacking wood. I have those memories. I remember when we got air conditioning for the first time. I'm in my late 40s, moving towards 50. I'm not that old, but I still have these memories in me, right? And so I don't have as much nostalgia for the old days because I lived it. I have those memories of the old days. I remember my great grandmother teaching me how to cook, and it started with going outside and learning to pick the right kindling to start the fire and cutting the wood just right so that we had the little slats to get the fire started and to keep the fire going to adjust the temperature up when the fire needed to be adjusted up, but also getting the bigger logs so that you had a consistent fire going in the stove. I remember learning all that. So I don't have that nostalgia, that romanticism of these earlier times, right? I remember bringing in the harvest with my family and having to sit there and break beans, endlessly breaking beans so that we could get them canned. I have those memories. They're not bad memories. They're not romanticized in me. I remember that life. I remember hunting for food. I remember all that. And I think a lot of what we are romanticizing, especially for people who get involved in paganism, is that old school way of life of, oh, things were so much simpler before people had jobs. And they were. Like, it's hard to remember that the average peasant had more days off by far than anybody working a day job in the modern world. They had more free time than anybody working in the modern world. And that's mind boggling when you think about it. right? That's just kind of breaks your brain when you think about how much free time and off time they had. But that's because work was seasonal. Yeah, it was easier. They had more time off, but it was harder because they had to get everything done in less time. They had to have enough food brought in to survive the winter and to pay off their liege lords and all the rest, right? I think we have to be very careful of this nostalgia for a world we never lived in, this kind of romanticism of this delightful past that was somehow just idyllic and bucolic and just safe. Because it wasn't. There were wolves in the woods that would threaten you. There were bears in the woods that would threaten you. And yeah, some people still live in places like that. Many of the places that I live, like around here, we killed off most of the wolves. I still have to worry if I go walking around in nature because we still have a lot of snakes and a lot of very dangerous ticks that can give you a lot of different diseases. So I still have to be careful out in the woods around here, but I don't really have to worry about the bears and the cougars and the wolves because we killed them off. They're not really there. And so when we think about our modern paganism, when we think about connecting to our spirituality, whatever it happens to be, I think we have to be mindful and careful that we're not just going into this romantic nostalgia for a time that never was. You know, it can be fun to sit around with a bunch of Nordic pagans and talk about one day in Valhalla and drinking your mead, having that imaginal time thinking about being in the long house, right? But that's not all that life was back then. Life was hard. Life has always been hard. We just keep changing the way we make it hard on people. If we're going to have successful, fulfilling lives, no matter what path we're following, we have to be grateful for what we have and make sure that whatever the practices that we have are, they work with our modern lives, that they fit within the world that we live in now.
That's where that living in right relationship comes in. The answer to how do you do life as a modern pagan is that very thing. Live in right relationship with yourself, with your environment that you're in, and with the stories. Because as Charlie already demonstrated earlier, these stories still fit. They're still very much alive in our modern society, in our modern world that we live in. We just have to see it, and then we can live it.
And
And once
that's
we
a
see
lot of
it,
yeah, that's a lot of this process of re-enchanting, right? Is when you start seeing like we haven't stopped telling stories about the gods, we just changed the names of the gods. Like all the stories are still there. We don't have to look for just Loki in a Marvel movie, right? Calvin and Hobbes is a comic strip about Loki. That's Loki. I don't know how you can see it any other way. Maybe you have another deity that you want to throw in there. But we have always told these stories. We've always had these stories with us. We just keep reskinning them so that they mean something to us today. And I think if we're not careful, if we try to fossilize and make our lore into a museum, right? You can't touch it. If you do, you have to wear the special gloves. We're going to put it up on a pedestal. Tell me that Dagda ever wanted to be on a pedestal, right? Find me anywhere in the lore where the Dagda's like, now you have to treat me nice and bow and worship and say kind word. Like Dagda's at the fire having drinks with people. Dagda's on the battlefield wielding, I want to say his shillelagh, but it technically wasn't a shillelagh, but wielding his club, right? Oma is a contradiction. Oma is probably our favorite contradiction. The strongest of the gods, the greatest warrior of the gods, the wisest of them. We love a strong man who's also wise. It's a trope we still have. We see Oma in all of our fiction. We see Oma everywhere. And I get the yearning, right? And I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum. If you really want to be about that cottage life, if you really want to, you know, really have that aesthetic, but understand that that's what it is. You're adopting an aesthetic for either your life or your spirituality, but your life still has to be here because we're here. And no, you don't have to work. You don't have to use your cell phone or your magic, but I know a lot of us, that's where our grimoires are. That's where our spell books are because we always have it on us. And when you want to write something down, you just jot it down in there. You open that notes app. How many people's grimoire is their notes app? Right? You know who you are. And yes, it's beautiful seeing these wonderful handwritten, hand drawn, hand illustrated grimoires that are just perfect for Instagram, somebody's YouTube channel. And if that's you and that's how you feel like doing it, do it. I just don't want us to be pressuring people into a lifestyle. 'Cause I don't think there's a lifestyle for this. I don't think you have to make sure that you're dressing a certain way or living a certain way or having a prerequisite number of bottles and jars in your house, right? We're all into teas and tinctures and potion making, right? So our house is filled with jars of herbs and spices and got a kombucha brewing over on the table. That's our life. It doesn't have to be yours. And I just see so much both events towards this homogenization and people starting to make these. I'm here for the simple paganism. I'm not about these elaborate rituals. You know what? Our ancestors weren't about elaborate rituals either. They had a couple, and everybody would go to the wrath and they would go to the circle and there'd be the sacrifices. Then you have the party. Everybody always forgets that after the ritual was a party, especially in our Irish paganism. After every ceremony, there was a party. You always threw a party. And you still should. Feasting is still part of the practice. And it's part of the work. And there should be
Very
joy there.
much.
Nothing devastates me more than when I hear an American, I'll just leave it vague, say that they're tired of oh, they're so stressed out about all the work getting ready for the Thanksgiving meal or the Christmas dinner or whatever. Why? These are supposed to be celebrations of family and friends and love and caring and giving. If they're nothing but stress for you, why are you doing that? I really think we need to be asking ourselves those questions a lot more. If they're all about the stress, why are you doing that? Look, there are times when I love a good ritual, a good ceremony. And we take the time and we set everything up and we make sure that we have everything and we go out, lift the swords and light the candles and pour the libations and all the things, incense, all of it. But we had a very low key Imbolc this year. And the thing that I remember most is cobbler, that berries and cream cobbler that you made. It was just an idea. It wasn't even what we were planning to make. We had something completely different planned. And then you had a sudden inspiration, right? And that to me is my joyful memory of celebrating Imbolc this year because it was that taste of spring, that taste of joy, that taste of life, that celebration, everything that we wanted for the holiday. And it was in an unplanned dessert that you made that you just suddenly got an inspiration for.
That's the thing too, as a modern pagan. It's part of that is just sitting back, it's listening. Dogda whispered in my ear, "Hey, do this cobbler. It's gonna be amazing." I went, "Okay." Or actually I went, "Yes, chef."
Yes,
And
chef.
got to it. And as a dutiful sous chef, that is what I'm supposed to do. I said, "Yes, chef," and got to cooking. And it was magical.
It was amazing. And that's fine. Like, did we do an elaborate ritual this year? No. Did we put our blankets out to get blessed? Yes. Yes, we did.
Smell like fresh spring filled into a blanket
It's
form.
really
It's
disturbing.
amazing.
It's kind of
It's
disturbing. Like, yeah, I
kind
agree
of
they're
disturbing.
amazing, but it's like there were no flowers when these were outside. Why do they smell like cotton?
No, no, they smell like they've been sitting in a fresh spring garden with all
They
the
do.
flowers
They
around them.
really, really, really do.
Like there's 8 inches of snow on the ground today. Like it's spring, but it's the beginning of spring. It's
And
the
they still smell, and they still smell like that all the way from Imbolc.
it's yeah.
But that's the thing.
But
You need to live for you. This is your life. You're not living for the tradition. The only obligations that you have are the obligations that you set yourself towards. And that's, I think, where people get wrong with spirituality and with religion is they feel like they're living for it rather than it there as a tool for them. Religion is about community. Spirituality is about bettering ourselves and our lives and giving our lives meaning. And if we're going to really thrive in this new pagan world that we're building, we have to remember that this is for us and not to kill ourselves because we have to get everything done. Would I
yeah,
love to have the energy to do some elaborate ceremonies for this, that, and the other holiday? Yes. Do I remember the Beltanes of my youth where we would get around and the bonfire and belly dancers would be going and drummers would be going and would be singing all night, singing and dancing and making love into the wee hours of the morning? Yeah, I remember those. They were amazing. They were wonderful. And because of the events of life, all of the people that were there have scattered to the wind. They're all over the place. And we very rarely get to see each other in person. And there's part of me that's nostalgic and wishes they could have that back, but I couldn't recreate those if I wanted to. We didn't hire belly dancers. just some of the people that were in attendance were belly dancers. And they asked, like, do you mind if we belly dance around the fire? The spell handed, like, sure. Right. It was a confluence of a lot of happy accidents. Not to get my Bob Ross on, but it was all just a bunch of happy accidents that made those so magical. Friends bringing in their mead that had finally cured enough for them to open the casks that they had made specifically for the holiday. Right? I can go out and buy mead for the holiday, but it won't be the same because it won't have that loving care and we won't see that smile, that smiling face of, yeah, I made that. Yeah, I made that. I could make my own if I wanted to, but that's if I want to. Don't stress out.
No, don't stress out. And then I guess this is a good time to share. Why do I always call myself sous chef to the Dagda instead of like a priest of the dog or something like that? Because living as a modern pagan and living in right relationship with my paganism, with the Dagda, the sous chef relationship was more appropriate for our relationship. We joke around and have more of that level of camaraderie that was more appropriate for me, which is why you'll hear me when I introduce myself, I introduce myself like that instead of saying I'm a priest of the Dagda, because even though that is the traditional term and all, and that's an okay term, there's a lot of people that have more of that traditional relationship. But for myself, that's what worked. Both living in right relationship with the tradition as a tradition, but also allowing it to be modern in this modern period.
It was a lot of soul searching for me. Like the reason I call myself a priest is not because it sounds so holy or anything like that. It was Brigid's bard was too limited because I feel called not just to the storytelling, but to the justice making and the healing and all of that as well. I can see both this sacerdotal role where I have my devotions and work for the goddess, but I also have a communal role where I have my work for the community. And so for me, the only word that was appropriate was priest. If you're questioning any of this, Laura O'Brien has a wonderful book called Pagan Priesthood that I highly recommend that you read. And it goes through a lot of these questions to be soul searching on. Like, is this really the path that you want to be on? How do you discern? How do you know? How do you really go through this? And it's a book that I know I read through like 4 times when I was debating over, am I just a bard of Brigid's? Am I a priest? What am I? What is this relationship that we have? What does this relationship look like? And I think you need to find the terms that are right for you. And if that's wizard, be a wizard.
It was a like I said, for me that works, sous chef. It's very much more that kind of relationship. I'm here to learn, I'm here to help prep things for Dagda, whatever the quote unquote dish is that is to be prepared. Which is more metaphorical than technical. At the same time I might hear while he's busy preparing the final dish, he might be yelling at me for being an imbecile and how much he would rather hear the grinding of cow meat into a burger than to hear me pronounce one more word or attempt to pronounce one more word of Gaelic. But it's still said with all love. And he still has my back. No one comes for me. They're going to have to deal with him first, That last bit may or may not have been an actual quote. One point. Oh,
Oh, that's a story that I don't know, we might
oh
share
yeah.
that. But
Yeah. But at the same time,
I think if we were not so laid back about things, it'd be easier for us to make some of the more popular content. We'll get around to talking about how to do stuff to help with prosperity and finding out what prosperity and abundance means for you and all of those things that trend that you see people talking about. Yeah, we'll get around to all that.
so
But
I sit back and I go, trust me, Danielson, you have already been learning.
yes, yes. I think one of the biggest problems is people aren't putting in the basic work and they're wondering why their spells don't. And that's why you only hear me talking about certain channels or certain other podcasts that it's not to throw shade on everybody else. If I'm mentioning somebody, it's somebody that I feel has put in the work and who is teaching others to put in the work, whether it's in the tradition that they practice or just in general. Because I see a lot of just get rich quick schemes masquerading as magic lessons. And if that's what you came to magic for, that's not magic's a slow burn. Like we've said before, yeah, sometimes you can get some instantaneous effects, but magic for the most part is a slow burn. It gets you where you need to get. It can help keep you from some things that you don't want to slide into. but it's a slow burn. It's not, you don't do a spell and get a winning lottery ticket every time. That's not how magic works. And if that's the idea that you have for it, you're going to be very disappointed in the work that you're doing.
That's
That's
where I
what
like to say, think of it. I like to try to make those food analogies again. You could get the most amazing cut of steak, for instance, and it doesn't matter how perfect that cut is if you don't know what you're doing with it, and you season it vulgarly and you cook it in a manner unbecoming, like blast steam it or something.
you can
You know,
microwave a steak.
you can microwave a steak, just drown it in salt and nothing else, or even not season it at all and then microwave it. Like, it's just, if you don't have those other foundational understandings of like, hey, an appropriate level of seasoning, here's some cooking techniques that will actually handle that protein better and turn out a better quality meal. Like, you're going to end up with it may have cooked good, but is it really food when you're done with it? Not knocking microwaving steaks. There are ways that can be done even in a microwave that could be amazing, but there's a lot of basics that have to be
That's a
understood
lot of
to
technique.
pull
Yeah.
that off. That's a ridiculous amount of technique. I personally would not attempt that. I'm also going to say it can be done because there's probably some people out there that are wizards with microwaves that, but they have still those other foundational understandings. That they have the building blocks of understanding how the protein has to cook to be able to make the microwave work correctly, to make the magic happen.
So we just wanted to talk about this because it's a topic that I've seen kind of floating around out there. And I realized I had a lot that I wanted to say about it because I do think that, look, life is stressful enough. If your spiritual practice is adding to that stress, changes need to be made. This isn't about stressing us out. It's about making our lives better, easier, and more fulfilling. And as long as that's your goal, you're going to get a lot out of it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'd love to know your experiences with all this. What are your thoughts about the state of modern paganism? What's the state of magical instruction that's out there? Do you have any comments or critiques about how we're doing with all that? I'd love to know. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment, they will not let us know, so we won't know that you did it. But go ahead and leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationpass.com, click on chat. You can leave a message there, and we will be able to see it and be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. Again, thank you to our most recent annual member. You all really do mean a lot to us. You can also support us over on Patreon and Ko-fi. Or directly through Cash App, through the cash tag Creations Path. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If you don't have any money right now, or you're not sure that we're the kind of people you want to give your hard-earned treasure to, that's perfectly all right. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, or you've got an episode that you think would help somebody else out, please share it. It really does help us out more than you know. And thank you to everybody who does that, and everybody who comments and helps keep our spirits up in these dark times. Y'all are amazing. All right. Before we go, we usually say a prayer and inspiration that flows through all things, that has always been, always is, and always will be. That great breath that breathes through us as we speak our inspirations into the world. Guide us, lead us, and enliven us, that we may live in this world with purpose, meaning, and hope. Amen.
Amen.